The 331 Project. What we found in the walls of Crestwood Psychiatric Facility. Account compiled by M. Hargrove for public record only. Part 1. The tape. I want to be very clear about something before you read any further. I am not a superstitious person. I am a 34-year-old archivist who spent 11 years cataloging municipal records for the city of Dunmore, Pennsylvania. I believe in documentation. I believe in evidence. I believe in the kind of truth you can hold in both hands and weigh. What I am about to describe does not fit neatly into any of those categories, and it has taken me 8 months. 8 months of not sleeping through the night. 8 months of checking the lock on my bedroom door before I close my eyes. 8 months of waking at 3:31 a.m. without fail, to find the courage to write it down. My name is Marcus Hargrove. In February of last year, I was contracted by Dunmore County to process the physical archives of Crestwood Psychiatric Facility, which had been closed since 1987. The county had recently purchased the building with the intent to convert it into subsidized housing, a project that has since been indefinitely postponed. For reasons you will understand by the end of this account, my job was straightforward: catalog, photograph, and prepare for transfer any documents with administrative or historical value. Box everything else for disposal. I had worked in decommissioned buildings before: old courthouses, shuttered schools, an abandoned fire station that smelled magnificently of motor oil and old leather. The work is dull and satisfying in the way that sorting is always dull and satisfying. You impose order on chaos. You make sense of things. I expected Crestwood to be no different. I was wrong about that. The facility sat on 12 acres at the eastern edge of the county, at the end of a road the locals still call Crestwood Lane even though the sign came down decades ago. The building itself was 3 stories of depression-era limestone, severe and gray, surrounded by a perimeter of old-growth oak so dense that by 10 in the morning the upper floors were already deepening into shadow. The county had restored basic power and heat. They had not restored the smell, that particular institutional bouquet of mildew, old paint, and something underneath, something organic and unplacable, that clung to your clothes and your hair long after you'd left for the day. I started in the administrative wing on the ground floor. Patient files, staff records, maintenance logs. Nothing remarkable. 3 days in, I moved to the sub-basement, which the original building plans labeled archive storage, restricted. This was where they had kept the older material, the records predating the formal administrative overhaul of 1971. I expected deterioration. I expected mold. What I found, buried beneath 37 years of institutional detritus, was a cardboard box with a single word written on it in black marker. Dormant. Written in black marker on a standard archival box. Approximately 18 inches x 12 inches x 10 inches. No date. No file number. No initialing staff signature. Contents. 1. Reel-to-reel audio tape. 7-inch. Unlabeled. 1. Manila folder. Contents described below. 1. Handwritten journal. 140 pages. Spiral bound. I will not pretend I had no reservations about what I was looking at. There was something about the way the box had been positioned, not stacked haphazardly like everything around it, but placed deliberately, spine out, as though someone had wanted to be able to find it again quickly, or had wanted someone else to find it. I photographed it in place before I touched it. Then I opened it. Part 2. The patient. The manila folder contained a single patient intake sheet, partially water damaged, for an individual admitted to Crestwood on March 14, 1979. I will use only the patient's initials here, as I have been advised by the county's legal department that full disclosure of patient records, even historical ones, may carry liability. The patient's name was recorded as Eleanor Voss, patient number 3310. A 31-year-old woman admitted under what the intake form called acute delusional disorder with somatic presentation. The intake notes were brief and bureaucratic in the way all such documents were in that era. Family-initiated admission. History of insomnia. Claims of auditory and visual phenomena. The physician's handwriting was difficult to read, cramped and angular, but one phrase near the bottom of the page was written with unusual care, as though the writer had paused and chosen each word deliberately. Patient presents with a remarkable fixation on the hour of 3:31 a.m. States that she has not slept past this time in 14 months. States that she cannot. States that something is learning her schedule. I find this phrasing curious. I have recorded it precisely. The journal in the box was hers. It took me the better part of an afternoon just to establish that. Cross-referencing the handwriting on the intake sheet with the journal's entries. The journal began, based on internal dates, approximately 4 months before her admission, in November of 1978. and ended abruptly in what I can only estimate was mid-April of 1979. Roughly a month after she came to Crestwood. The last entry was not a written one, but I am getting ahead of myself. Eleanor Voss had been, by all accounts available to me, an unremarkable woman in the most affectionate sense of the word. 43 years of clerical work for the Dunmore County Department of Education. Widowed in 1972. 2 adult children, both of whom had relocated to other states by the time of her admission. She lived alone in a house on Prescott Street, a house that, I later discovered, no longer exists. Demolished in 1993 to make way for a parking structure. I mention this because it will matter later. There is no physical location remaining where the things she describes might still be present. I have tried to tell myself this as a comfort. I transcribed the full journal at home that evening. I am including the relevant sections here. November 3rd. 1978. I woke again at 3:31. 4th night in a row. I've started keeping the clock on the far side of the room. I thought if I couldn't see it, I wouldn't fixate on the time. But I always know. I wake up and I know exactly what the clock will say before I turn on the light to look. It always says 3:31, not 3:30, not 3:32, always 3:31. I think it's the house settling. Old houses make sounds. I know this. But the sound that wakes me isn't the house. It's more like breathing, slow and patient. From the wall behind the headboard, I pressed my ear against the plaster last night and listened for a long time. And I am certain now that there is a rhythm to it. In out, not mechanical, not pipes, something with a lung. I did not sleep again after that. I sat up and watched the door until it was light. November 11th. 1978. I called the gas company and had a man come out. He spent 2 hours in the basement and in the crawl space. He told me the pipes were old but there were no leaks, no blockages. Nothing that would make the sound I described. He looked at me with a very particular expression while I was explaining it, and I recognized the expression because it is the same one my daughter uses. I have started leaving a light on in the hallway. November 29th. 1978. 3 weeks of it now. Always 3:31. Always the breathing. Last night for the first time it stopped. I mean to say, the breathing stopped. It was so sudden that the silence woke me up. I had been half asleep, listening to it, and then it just stopped. And the stopping was louder than the breathing ever was. I lay there for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I don't know. And then very slowly something in the wall began to tap. 3 taps. Pause. 1 tap. Over and over. 3 1 3 1 3 1 3 1 3:31. It was communicating. I don't know what else to call it. It knows the time and it was telling me it knows. Part 3. The tape continued. I would like to pause here and acknowledge what I am describing. A lonely, recently widowed woman, living alone, in an old house, experiencing sleep disturbances. Any reasonable clinician in 1979, or today, would look at those circumstances and propose explanations that require no supernatural component whatsoever. Grief, isolation, early onset dementia, hypnagogic hallucinations, pareidolia. The physician who admitted her to Crestwood had clearly arrived at similar conclusions. I read his notes. They were confident, even slightly dismissive. He had seen this before. He knew what it was. I am asking you to hold that framework in your mind as you continue reading, because it is the framework I held onto for as long as I could. It helped. For a while. It stopped helping somewhere around the 4th week of waking up at 3:31 a.m. But the tape. I need to tell you about the tape. I did not have the equipment to play a reel-to-reel tape at home. I made some calls, pulled in a favor from a colleague in the history department at Dunmore Community College, and arranged to digitize it the following morning. I want to record here, for the sake of completeness, that I slept soundly that first night. I did not yet wake at 3:31. That came later. I am telling you this to be precise about the timeline, about when things changed, because the timeline matters. The tape ran for approximately 47 minutes. The audio quality was poor, that thin, hissing texture of aging magnetic tape, but intelligible for most of its length. What I was hearing, I quickly realized, was a recorded therapy session. The voice of the therapist was a man, low and careful, who identified himself at the opening of the recording as Dr. Alan Marsh, staff psychiatrist, Crestwood Psychiatric Facility. The date he gave was April 2, 1979. 19 days before the facility's records indicated Eleanor Voss had been transferred to an unnamed long-term care facility in the western part of the state. I am going to transcribe the relevant sections of that recording here. I have listened to it, in full, 14 times. I have listened to specific passages more times than I can count. Some of what I transcribed, I wish I hadn't. I have decided that I am not going to fight it anymore. It has been patient with me. I should be patient with it. Eleanor Voss. April 2nd, 1979. Part 4. Transcript. Session recording. April 2nd, 1979. Begin transcript. 0 hours, 4 minutes, and 17 seconds. Dr. Marsh. Eleanor, I want to go back to what you told me on Thursday about the journal. You said it started responding to what you'd written. Voss. I know how that sounds. Dr. Marsh. I'm not here to judge how things sound. I want to understand what you experienced. Voss. I'd written in the journal that I was frightened. That was, I don't know when. Late January I think. And the next morning I woke at 3:31 and the sound was different. It wasn't the breathing. It was more like humming, low, almost like a voice. And when I pressed my ear to the wall it stopped. The way it always stops when I get too close. And it tapped. But this time it wasn't the pattern. It wasn't the 3-1. It was something longer. I counted. I wrote it down. Pause. I have it here. Dr. Marsh. You wrote it down. Voss. Sound of paper. 5 taps. 2 taps. 8 taps. 5 taps. 3 taps. Over and over. Dr. Marsh. And what did you make of that? Voss. Long pause. The letters. Doctor. Count by alphabet. 5 is E. 2 is B. 8 is H. 5 is E. 3 is C. E B H E C. That's not a word. I thought I was wrong. So I started over and I counted differently. 5 minus 1. 2 minus 1. Dr. Marsh. Eleanor. Voss. GDB. That's not anything either. So I tried the obvious thing. I tried thinking of it as, what's the word? Dr. Marsh. As a code? Voss. A substitution. Where you shift the alphabet. You know this? Where A becomes B. B becomes C. Dr. Marsh. A Caesar cipher. Voss. I know how to spell my own name. Dr. Marsh. Pause. I'm sorry. I know how that sounded. I'm sorry. Sound of breathing. I shifted by 1 letter back. E becomes D. B becomes A. H becomes G. E becomes D. C becomes B. Long pause. Dr. Marsh. And that's spelled? Voss. Quietly. GDB. No. Pause. Sorry. Shift back gives you. GDB. That's not it. Sound of paper rustling. Forward. If you go forward. FCIFD. Dr. Marsh. That's also not a word. Voss. No. Pause. So I stopped trying alphabets. I tried thinking of it differently. What if the numbers aren't a code? What if they just? What if they're numbers? Dr. Marsh. What do you mean? Voss. 52-85-3. What if that's coordinates? What if that's a time? What if? Pause. Longer this time. What if it's my address? Sound of something being set down carefully on a hard surface. Dr. Marsh. Your address? Voss. Very quietly. 5285 Prescott. That's my house number. 5285. And then 3. And 3 is March. March is the month I moved in 22 years ago. It knew where I lived before I moved there. It's been waiting for me in that house for 22 years. Part 5. What the journal said next. I had to stop the recording at that point. Not because I was frightened. I told myself. But because I needed coffee and the room had gotten very cold. I sat in the small digitization studio for a while with my hands around a paper cup, thinking about what I had just heard. Trying to locate the mundane explanation that I knew had to be there. A woman in a psychiatric facility in 1979 believed that the numbers tapped on her wall were her address. What does that tell us? It tells us that she was suffering. It tells us that a frightened mind will find patterns in anything, will impose meaning on noise, will find a message in randomness because finding a message is better than facing the void. I was still telling myself this when I went back to the journal that evening. The entries became increasingly fragmented through February and into March of 1979. The handwriting changed, more compressed, the letters beginning to run together, the lines starting to drift from the horizontal. But the content grew sharper. Paradoxically more precise. She had begun to treat the encounter with something like scientific method. She documented every night. Time of waking, always 3:31. Duration of the breathing, variable, between 8 and 23 minutes. Pattern of the tapping, always new, never repeated. She had begun to develop a theory. It is learning me. I have come to understand this. Each night it presents something new, a new pattern, a new sound. And waits. I think it is looking for a reaction. I think it is mapping what frightens me and what does not. Last night I stayed very calm. I lay still and breathed slowly and didn't press my ear to the wall. In the morning I found that the threshold of the closet, the one directly adjacent to the relevant wall, had been crossed. There was a handprint in the dust just inside the closet door. A full handprint. 5 fingers. Pressed flat. Too large to be mine. Palm down. As though something had put its weight down there. As though it had climbed through. I have measured the handprint. I have drawn its outline in this journal. Here she had traced a hand outline in pencil. The proportions were wrong. The fingers were too long. The palm was too narrow. It was approximately the size of a large adult hand, but with a geometry that human hands do not have. I cleaned the dust. Tonight I will watch the closet. The entry for February 15th was only 4 words. It watched me back. The entries that followed were partially illegible. She had been writing in the dark, I think. The pen pressure was inconsistent, the lines sometimes overlapping, but the entry for March 2nd, 12 days before her admission to Crestwood, was written with deliberate care in the daylight hours. I could tell because the handwriting was her earlier self again, controlled and even, as though she had made a decision and was documenting it clearly before proceeding. I have decided that I am not going to fight it anymore. It has been patient with me. I should be patient with it. Here is what I have concluded. After 4 months of observation. 1. It is not malicious. It has had ample opportunity to harm me and has not done so. It frightens me, but I have come to think the frightening is not intentional. It is simply a byproduct of its nature. The way a very large animal frightens you not because it means to but because of what it is. 2. It is not of this house. The house is a location it has chosen. For reasons I cannot determine. It was here before me and I believe it will be here after. 3. It communicates at 3:31 specifically. Not 3:30. Not 3:32. I have tested this. I set my alarm for 3:28 for 3 consecutive nights and lay awake waiting. Nothing. On the 4th night I reset for 3:29. Still nothing. The 5th night. 3:30. Silence. The 6th night I let it come naturally. 3:31. The tapping, the breathing, whatever it is does not operate on human schedules. It operates on something else entirely. Something that intersects with our clocks only at that single point. 4. I believe I am not the first person it has chosen. I believe there have been others in this house. I found initials carved into the baseboard behind my bed. WAH 1956, ML 1944, JP 1931, PAC 1919. Each set of initials is accompanied by a small symbol that I cannot identify but that appears in each case to be the same symbol, a small horizontal figure 8, which I have always understood to be the symbol for infinity, but tilted 45 degrees, so that it resembles an hourglass. Or possibly an I. 5. It knew my address. It knew when I moved in. I do not know what else it knows. I have decided it is time to find out. Part 6. The part of the tape I didn't want to include. The recording resumed after a brief gap in the audio, a mechanical pause, a tape splice or a recording lapse, and when it continued, the quality had changed. The hiss was louder. Dr. Marsh's voice was the same, but Eleanor's had shifted in a way that is difficult to describe in text. It had become quieter isn't the right word. Closer. As though she had leaned toward the microphone. As though she was speaking very deliberately. Dr. Marsh, you said last week that you'd made contact. That you'd asked it a question and received an answer. Can you tell me more about that? Voss. I asked it what it wanted. Dr. Marsh. And? Voss. Pause. It stopped tapping. For the first time in 4 months it just stopped. And then it did something new. Long pause. It spoke. Dr. Marsh. Spoke how? Voss. Not words. It was like, if you put your ear very close to a seashell. That pressure sound. But inside the pressure sound there was something with a rhythm. I had to listen for a long time. Pause. I understood it eventually. I think. I'm not. I want to be careful about how I say this because I know what it sounds like. Dr. Marsh. Just tell me what you understood. Voss. Very quietly. It said it doesn't want anything. It said it's not here for me. Pause. It said I started listening and that changes things. It said that wants something like me. By which I understood it to mean, wants something alive in the normal way, wants something like that begins to really listen. It can't unlisten. The act of listening opens something. Pause. It said there's a door. Not a physical door. A permeability. A thinning. And it said the thinning happens at 3:31 because that's where the time runs thinnest. Not every night. Not everywhere. But in certain places. At certain times. The wall between its existence and mine becomes something you can almost reach through. Long pause. And once you know that, once you've put your ear to it and felt the breathing. Dr. Marsh. Eleanor. Voss. It said, you already know you won't sleep through it anymore. Pause. It said, you already know. I listened to that section 6 times the night I first transcribed it. Then I went to bed. I know the exact time I turned off the light because I checked my phone. 11:47 p.m. I remember thinking how tired I was, how the days in the facility were long and physically draining. How I would sleep well. I remember being grateful for it. I woke at 3:31 a.m. There was nothing in my walls. No breathing. No tapping, just the particular silence of a sleeping apartment building, and a certainty I could not explain, a knowledge that arrived fully formed in the 2 seconds between sleep and waking. I was awake, and it was 3:31, and I would be awake again tomorrow at 3:31, and the night after that, and the night after that. The knowledge felt like a door closing, not violently, quietly, with the soft click of a latch. I checked my phone. It said 3:31, part 7. What I found in the walls. I returned to Crestwood the next morning with a different kind of attention. I want to be precise about what I mean by that. I was not pursuing something supernatural. I was pursuing the documented experience of a woman who had believed in something specific, and I was a professional who needed to understand what I was cataloging. That was the frame I gave it. I held on to that frame quite carefully. I returned to the sub-basement first. I examined the area around the box more carefully, and in doing so I discovered that the shelf it had sat on was not flush against the wall. There was a gap of about 4 inches, and in that gap, pushed to the back, was a second object I had missed on my initial sweep, a small tin box, the kind that once held throat lozenges, sealed with a strip of medical adhesive tape. On the tape, in the same black marker as the exterior of the cardboard box, was written, "Do not open in the building." Note: I did not follow this instruction. I opened it at my car. Contents: 12 index cards. Each card bore a name, a set of dates, and a small symbol drawn in what appeared to be rust-colored ink. The symbol was the same on each card, a figure 8 rotated 45 degrees. The names: 1. P.A. Caulfield, 1919 to 1923. 2. J. Pemberton, 1931 to 1934. 3. M. Lang, 1944 to 1945. 4. W. A. Haley, 1956 to 1961. 5. R. Dominguez, 1963 to 1965. 6. C. Morrison, 1967 to 1967. 7. F. T. Bauer, 1969 to 1972. 8. S. L. Park, 1974 to 1977. 9. Eleanor Voss, 1978. The ninth card had no closing date. It was, unlike the others, blank in the date and field, as though whoever had made the cards had not known, or had not been willing to record, when Eleanor Voss's experience ended, as though they were still waiting to find out. The 10th, 11th, and 12th cards were blank except for the symbol. 3 blank cards. 3 names that hadn't happened yet. I went back inside after that, because the frame I had constructed, the professional frame, the archivist's frame, required that I go back inside. I had a job. I documented the discovery according to protocol. I photographed everything. I noted everything. And then I went to the patient wing on the 3rd floor, which I had not yet processed, and I found room 331. Room 331 was different from the other patient rooms in one specific and immediately visible way. It had been sealed, not locked. The locks on all the room doors were the same institutional deadbolts, and most of them had been opened by the county's facilities team before my arrival. Room 331 had been sealed with wooden boards nailed across the door frame, and then painted over, and then, at some later point, based on the color difference, painted over again. Someone had sealed this room twice, on 2 separate occasions, with what appeared to be a significant investment of intent. The facilities team had included a crowbar in the supply cache they'd left in the hallway. I am a 34-year-old archivist. I have no business using a crowbar. I used the crowbar. The room was small, a single window, long boarded, a metal bed frame, no mattress, a built-in closet on the north wall. The plaster was in bad condition, patched in several places with newer material that hadn't been painted to match, rushed patches, functional but not aesthetic. On the east wall, directly behind where the bed's headboard would have been, someone had written in large black letters, "Floor to ceiling," filling the entire wall. It is not 331 everywhere. It is 331 in the place behind the place. It is always 331 there, and it is always reaching. Below this, smaller, in what I now recognized as Eleanor Voss's handwriting. I tried to go back. They won't let me go back. But it doesn't need me to go back. I already listened. The door is open now. The door stays open. I'm so sorry. I didn't know the door stays open. Part 8. The other names. I spent 3 weeks trying to trace the names on the index cards. This was, I reminded myself, archival research. Normal archival research. The kind I did every day. P.A. Caulfield. Probate records. Dunmore County, 1923. Died intestate. Death listed as respiratory failure. Age 44. Lived at 5285 Prescott Street. J. Pemberton. Cemetery records. Street. Agatha's Parish, 1934. Cause of death: Listed as nervous exhaustion, a phrase that would have made a Victorian physician comfortable and means nothing medically. Age 38. Former address: 5285 Prescott Street. I stopped after M. Lang, who died in 1945 and had lived at the same address. I had already understood the pattern by then. I just needed to sit with it for a while. The house at 5285 Prescott Street, Eleanor Voss's house, the house that no longer exists, had been the home of at least 8 people who had, in sequence, beginning in 1919 and at regular intervals thereafter, experienced what Eleanor experienced. Some of them had survived it. The date ranges on the cards suggested they had eventually left the house, or been removed from it. W.A. Haley, for example, had 5 years listed, 1956 to 1961, 5 years before someone helped him or he helped himself. C. Morrison had only 1 year, 1967 to 1967. I don't know what happened in that single year, but I have not been able to find his death record in any county I've searched, which either means he is alive somewhere, or that he left Dunmore entirely, or that whatever happened to him left no paperwork. Eleanor Voss's card had no closing date. I went to the county records office and requested her transfer documentation from Crestwood. The transfer had been to a facility in Westmoreland County in April of 1979. The Westmoreland facility closed in 1991. Their records, I was told, had been transferred to the state archives. I submitted a formal request. It took 11 weeks. When the response came, it contained 1 page, an administrative note dated September 14, 1979, stating that patient Eleanor Voss, number 3310, had been discharged. Destination listed as home, but 5285 Prescott Street had been demolished 6 years before she was admitted to Crestwood. That address didn't exist anymore by 1979. She had no home to go to. I have spent 4 months trying to find what happened to Eleanor Voss after September of 1979. I have found nothing. No death record, no forwarding address, no social security activity, no further medical records of any kind. She simply ends, in the documentation, in September of 1979, discharged to an address that no longer exists. The 10th index card in the tin box was blank. I have my theory about what name was meant to go there. I have not written it on the card. The 11th card is also blank. I think about the 11th card a great deal. Part 9. The end of the tape. There is a final section of the recorded therapy session that I have not yet transcribed here. I have been avoiding it, not because it is the most disturbing section. It isn't, quite, but because it is the section that has stayed with me most. The one I hear when I lie awake at 3:31 a.m. and listen to the silence of my apartment and find myself noticing, for the first time, how the wall behind my bed seems to have a particular quality to its silence, a weight to it, a presence-shaped absence that I did not notice before I found the box. I am going to transcribe it now because I believe in documentation. I believe in evidence. I believe that things that are witnessed should be recorded, and that once they are recorded they are in some measure contained, given shape and boundary. I need to believe that. Dr. Marsh. One last thing. Eleanor, something you said last week is still with me. You said it told you that listening opens a door, and that the door stays open. Voss. Yes. Dr. Marsh, I want to ask you something directly. Do you believe that someone who simply hears your story, who you tell this to, can they open the door? Can it spread that way? Long silence. The tape hisses very loud in this section. Over the hiss, if you listen carefully, and I have listened carefully, many times, there is something that might be a sound and might be the deterioration of the magnetic tape. A low rhythmic sound, like breathing. Voss. Very quietly. I hope not. I genuinely hope not. Pause. But I don't know. I asked it. Pause. It said, some people will hear you and it won't matter. The listening has to be the right kind. The listening has to be real. Pause. It said most people won't really listen. They'll hear the words but they won't reach toward it. They won't feel curious about what's on the other side. They won't wonder what it sounds like, or whether, if they pressed their ear to the wall tonight at 3:31. Dr. Marsh. Eleanor, I don't think we should. Voss. Whether they might hear it too. Pause. It said the ones who find themselves wondering about that, really wondering, not just intellectually, but with the part of the mind that reaches toward things in the dark. It said those are the ones it can find. Pause. It said it doesn't come for you. It said you come to it. You come to it every night at 3:31 because by the time you've really heard this, you've already started listening. Very quietly. I'm so sorry. I didn't know it worked this way until it was too late. The tape ends there. There are 2 more minutes of hiss and then silence. Dr. Marsh's post-session notes, which I found clipped to the back of Eleanor's intake file, Recorded only this session difficult. Patient increasingly convinced her experience is transmissible. Recommend continued monitoring. Consider medication adjustment. Personal note. Not for file. I woke last night at 3:31. First time. Probably coincidence. I am making a note of it because I believe in making notes. Part 10. A note on what has happened since. Dr. Alan Marsh is listed in the Crestwood facility employment records through October of 1979. 6 months after the therapy session on the tape. His personnel file ends there without explanation. I requested his record from the Pennsylvania Medical Licensing Board. His license was voluntarily surrendered in November of 1979. No reason given. No disciplinary action. A voluntary surrender. I found one further document, tucked into the back of the personnel file. A brief letter, addressed to no one, unsigned. Written on Crestwood letterhead. I have woken at 3:31 every night for 7 months. I no longer consider this coincidence. I have begun to hear the breathing, not in any wall, but in the silence of whatever room I occupy, as though the thinning she described has followed me out of the context of the facility and into the context of my own life. I have begun to understand what she meant when she said the listening has to be real. I have spent 7 months trying to listen professionally, at a remove, analytically, as a clinician cataloging a patient's experience. I am now uncertain whether this distinction matters. The listening, perhaps, is the listening. I am leaving the practice. I am going somewhere quiet. I don't know whether this will help. I suspect it won't. But I believe in trying rational interventions before accepting irrational conclusions. And the rational conclusion to you wake at 3:31 every night is change something. If someone finds this, don't read the file. Don't listen to the tape. I mean this is practical advice, not superstition. I have documented everything because I am a physician and documentation is what we do. But I am beginning to think that documentation spreads things as surely as proximity does. I am beginning to think that's why she wrote it all down. I have continued to wake at 3:31 a.m. every night for the past 8 months. I have heard the breathing, or something I can only call that, on 37 separate occasions, through the east wall of my apartment bedroom. Faint enough to dismiss, consistent enough that I have stopped dismissing it. I have not tapped on the wall. I have not pressed my ear to it. I have made these choices deliberately, as a form of what I tell myself is discipline, though it also might be fear. The distinction between discipline and fear has become less clear to me over the course of this year. I have not returned to Crestwood Psychiatric Facility. The county has, as I mentioned, postponed the housing conversion indefinitely. A facilities manager I spoke with last month, a practical man, a careful man, someone who rolled his eyes slightly when I raised the subject of the sealed room, told me that 2 separate contractors had declined the renovation bid after visiting the 3rd floor. Neither one would give a clear reason. Both cited structural concerns, which my facilities manager contact found suspicious since a structural engineer's report from August had found the building completely sound. The room is still sealed, as far as I know. I asked him to leave it that way. He looked at me with the expression my daughter uses. I have thought about Eleanor Voss's theory. Her conclusion, arrived at on March 2, 1979. After 4 months of careful observation, her conclusion that it was not malicious, that the frightening was a byproduct, not an intent, that it had chosen the house, not her, and would remain after she left. I have been trying to find this comforting. I have not entirely succeeded. What I find myself returning to, at 3:31, in the particular quality of silence that has settled around my bed, is Eleanor's phrase from the session recording, "The door stays open," and the question that follows from it, which I cannot shake and which I will not ask you to answer for yourself because I think you probably already know whether the answer applies to you. When you were reading this, did any part of you wonder what it sounds like? Did any part of you, not your rational mind, not your skeptical mind, but the part that lives underneath those minds, the part that reaches toward things in the dark, did that part of you find itself listening, just a little, reaching, just slightly, toward something that might or might not be present on the other side of wherever you are right now? If not, you're fine. Go to sleep. You'll sleep well. If yes, I am so sorry. I didn't know it worked this way until it was too late. Check the time when you wake up tonight. You already know what it will say. Epilogue. Addendum. 6 weeks after initial posting. I did not expect this account to be read by as many people as it has been. I wrote it as documentation, as evidence, as the kind of truth you can hold in both hands and weigh. I have received, since posting it, approximately 4,000 messages. I have read a portion of them. I am going to share 3, without identifying information, because they are relevant to the record. My grandmother's name was Clara Morrison. She was born in 1941 and died in 2019. She never talked about her early life in Dunmore. Never. But she kept a tin of throat lozenges on her nightstand until the day she died. Completely empty. And she told us never to open it. We thought it was one of her eccentricities. We didn't open it until we were clearing out her house. Inside was a single index card. On it was a symbol that looks like a side